All right, let's get into it. Today, we are cracking open the code of human behavior. We're going to explore those deep internal forces that pretty much dictate everything we do and everything we feel.
I mean, it's the ultimate question, right? Why do you do the things you do? Why do you feel the way you feel? Think about it. From something as simple as grabbing a snack to, chasing a lifelong dream. Our lives are just this constant dance of pushes and pulls and passions. So what is really going on under the hood?
Okay, so let's start here. A good way to think about it is that your mind has this kind of internal operating system. And right at the core of that system, there are two fundamental programs that are running, like all the time.
So what are they? Motivation and emotion. Motivation? Well, that's the why behind your actions. It's the engine, what gets you moving. And then emotion, that's the experience of it all. It's the color and the texture of your inner world. And these two together, man, they shape pretty much everything.
So, let's tackle motivation first. What pushes us? What pulls us? Where does it even begin? Well, it all starts with our body's default state, this natural tendency it has to just seek balance.
That balance is called homeostasis. You can think of it as your body's happy place, its state of perfect equilibrium. It's kind of like the thermostat in your house, right? Your body is constantly working behind the scenes to keep things like your temperature and your energy levels stable. But what happens when that balance gets thrown off?
Well, that disruption, that creates what's called a drive. So, for example, when your blood sugar drops, you feel that internal tension of hunger. That feeling, that's an internal push. It's motivating you from the inside to go eat something and get back to that nice, balanced state.
But, it's not all about just reducing tension. Sometimes we're pulled by stuff in our environment. That's what we call an incentive. Picture this. You are totally stuffed after dinner, but then someone brings out a gorgeous, delicious-looking cake. That cake, that's an external goal, and it pulls you toward eating it, even when you have zero internal drive to do so.
Okay, so let's just break that down real quick. A drive is that internal push to fix something that's off, like thirst. An incentive is an external pull toward a reward. Like getting a bonus at work. Simple, right? Push versus pull. And these two forces, they are super powerful motivators. And a lot of the time, they're actually working together. And look, these internal drives, they aren't just some abstract concept. No, they are deeply rooted in our biology. Just take hunger. You've got hormones like ghrelin that are literally screaming, "Eat now," at your brain. And then you've got others like CCK and leptin that send the, "Okay, pump the brakes, you're full" message. It's this whole complex chemical conversation happening inside you all the time.
And of course, another really profound biological motivator is sex. The human sexual response, it follows this very predictable pattern, right? It moves through 4 distinct physiological stages, all the way from excitement to resolution. And this cycle, it's a really fundamental driver of our behavior. It's just deeply wired into us.
But here's the thing. Our motivations go way, way beyond just basic biology. There's also what's called the achievement motive. And this is a really powerful psychological driver. This is the force that pushes someone to, say, climb Mount Everest, or get a PhD, or just perfect a skill. See, it's not about survival anymore. It's about striving.
All right, so we've looked at what drives our actions, the whole push and pull thing. But what about the experience of it all? Let's switch gears and look at the other side of our inner engine, our feelings. I mean, what even is an emotion? And where do these things come from?
Okay, here's a classic thought experiment for you. You're walking in the woods, and bam, you see a bear. Now here's the question. Does your heart start pounding because you feel scared, or do you feel scared because your heart is pounding? It seems like a simple question, but believe it or not, this little puzzle has been at the center of a huge psychological debate for more than 100 years.
And that one question, it leads us to 3 major theories. First, you have the James-Lange theory. It says the physical stuff happens first. Your heart races, and then your brain labels that physical reaction as an emotion. Then there's the Cannon-Bard theory, which says, no, that's not right. It argues the stimulus, the bear, triggers brain activity that causes the racing heart and the feeling of fear at the exact same time. But then Schachter came along and added this really crucial step. His theory says, okay, you get the physical arousal, but then you cognitively appraise the situation. You look around for clues to figure out why you're aroused. And this was the game changer, realizing our thoughts, our interpretations, are part of the process. I mean, is my heart racing because of a bear, or because I'm on a really great first date? The label you put on it, it changes everything.
And again, this stuff isn't just abstract theory, it is wired directly into our brain's hardware. Take the amygdala, for example. You can think of it as your brain's little fear center, or its rapid response processor. It is constantly scanning for threats, and it can trigger a full-blown physical fear response before you're even consciously aware of what's going on. It's that fast.
So, this deep connection between our inner feelings and our physical bodies, well, it leads to a really fascinating question. If our emotions cause a measurable physical response, could we use a machine to detect something like a lie?
Well, here's the catch. A polygraph machine, a lie detector, doesn't actually detect lies. Not directly. What it does detect are the physiological signs of emotion, things like heart rate and breathing, what's called autonomic arousal. And that's the problem, right? Your heart might be racing because you're lying, or it could be racing because you're just incredibly nervous about being strapped to a machine and wrongly accused. And that's exactly why their reliability is, well, so hotly debated.
And you know, this whole thing really gets at a core truth about our emotional lives. At the end of the day, when it comes to things like happiness, our subjective feeling about a situation is way more important than the objective facts of that situation. I mean, you can have two people in the exact same circumstances, and one can be totally miserable while the other is perfectly content. It really shows you that so much of it is relative.
Okay, so we've seen how motivation and emotion are these really powerful, really subjective forces. And let's be honest, sometimes they can feel like they're the ones in the driver's seat. That's exactly why having a toolkit for clear thinking is so essential. It helps us step back and evaluate not just the world out there, but our own inner responses, and maybe, just maybe, avoid some common mental traps.
All right, check out this statement. You can't trust his climate science report, he cheated on his taxes. Now, at first glance, that might sound kind of convincing. But there's a huge flaw in the logic here. I mean, stop and think about it. What does someone cheating on their taxes have to do with the validity of their climate data?
Nothing, right? This is a classic example of what's called the irrelevant reasons fallacy. You might have also heard it called an ad hominem attack. The argument isn't even touching the science. It's attaching the person's character in order to get you to dismiss the evidence. It's a total distraction, not a real debate.
And there are a ton of these mental traps out there. You've got circular reasoning, that's basically just restating your conclusion as your proof. There's the slippery slope, where you argue that one tiny step is going to lead to some catastrophic chain of events. And then there's the false dichotomy, which tries to force you into an either-or choice when in reality there are tons of other options. Just being able to spot these is the first step to not falling for them.
So, let's put it all together. You've got these deep biological drives pushing you from the inside, and these external incentives pulling you from the outside. Then you've got this incredibly rich, complex world of emotion that colors your entire experience. And on top of all that, you have your logical mind, trying its best to make sense of everything. All these forces, they are constantly interacting, constantly shaping who you are and what you do every single second of every day.
And that leaves us with one last big question, a thought to chew on. If you understand your own wiring, if you know about the forces that push and pull you, and you understand how you process your own feelings, can you actually change your programming? Can you gain the power to consciously direct those forces? Because really, knowing the science behind why you do what you do, that's the absolute first step toward choosing what you do next.